if you would like, I have 3 planned, but let me know if you would like a 4th, and I will make it happen. Let's get into it. Alright, this first one is called The Little Girl Who Wasn't. I lived in a house of hell for 4 years, from age 11 to almost 16. There was constantly something happening. Doors flying open and shut, voices, footsteps. Nothing ever stayed where you put it. I was alone there a lot because both my parents worked, and I was constantly terrified. One of the most gut-level disturbing things, though, was the little girl in my bathroom. Every time I walked past my bathroom door, which was constantly, because it was right outside my bedroom, I saw a little girl with blonde, curled hair and a rose-colored dress. She just stood there staring, looking like a photograph from 1905. I started keeping the door closed so I could walk by without seeing her, but she was always there when I opened it. Once I stepped in past her, I couldn't see her anymore, but I could feel her there. She scared me, but I felt really sorry for her because she was trapped there, just like me, but probably forever. As the years went by and things in the house continued to get worse, she started seeming darker. I started feeling like she wasn't really a little girl. I knew there was something ugly in the house because I felt like it was presenting this sympathetic image to me. Then I started thinking I was completely losing my mind. One day, when I was 14, I had a friend from out of town come stay with me for a week. I hadn't told her anything whatsoever about the house because I didn't think she would come if I did. Right after she got there, we were sitting in my room and she left to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, she walked back in with a puzzled look on her face and said, so there's a little girl in your bathroom? Yeah, I said, she hangs out in there, blonde hair. My friend was like, girls, pink dress, yeah, you know that's not really a little girl, don't you? I almost threw up. I was so relieved and terrified and excited and ready to run out of the house screaming. She wouldn't use my bathroom the rest of the week, and I started using it as little as possible without pissing off my parents, who did not want to believe what I was saying. Eventually, we moved out, and I could not have been happier. I distanced myself from it mentally as much as I could. Then, when I was 18, I took another friend on a road trip to pack up a few things I'd left in the house. My parents hadn't managed to sell it and wouldn't for 5 more years. The minute we got on the property, my friend seemed uncomfortable. When we came around the bend in the long, steep driveway, he went completely white. I could tell something was wrong, but he insisted he was okay, so we got to work. After a while, he asked to use the bathroom, and I directed him to mine. Not 20 seconds after he left, he came running back in, gasping for breath, and slammed the bedroom door behind him. He started babbling about a little blonde girl who isn't really a little girl. All of a sudden, he went dead still, looked me in the eye, and very solemnly said, "She's not happy with you. You left, and you weren't supposed to." We threw whatever we could grab in 2 trips in my car after I walked him to another bathroom and waited outside the door, and then we got the F out of there at top speed. The second story is called Losing Yourself in China. So, when I was barely 20 years old, I was traveling with a small group of people through China, and we were spending about 2 months in the Qinghai province, which used to be a part of Tibet. Our destination was a specific town to teach English, but we'd been stopping often in towns and small cities along the way. One day we arrived in a rural town, very small, nothing unusual. We spent only a few days there, shopping for food at the markets and walking around to see the sights, although there weren't many. This was in the dead of winter, in February, and all the grass on the hills and plains around the town was dead and brown. The overall feeling was that of a normal kind of bleakness that any rural place has in winter. At this time in my life, things were going amazingly, extraordinarily well for me, and I say that because my teenagehood had been rather darkly overcast. But the overwhelming good luck of being able to travel and these close friends I'd made in the last year had more than changed my feelings and attitude toward life. It was like I was a whole new person. I was ecstatic to be in Tibet. I went to sleep with a smile on my face every night. On our second day staying in this small town, I woke up feeling a little odd. Not bad, just a little odd, like my normal thoughts and feelings had been turned down low, like on a dial. We all decided to go for a walk on the hills right behind the town, where there was a small summit with a pile of rocks and some prayer flags. To be honest, there were little altars like these on every other hill, but it gave us something to do. As we hiked up the hills behind the town, I started feeling stranger and stranger. I wasn't scared. I didn't feel angry or any strong emotion. In fact, it was like emotion was trickling out somehow, and I was getting blanker and blanker, emptier and emptier. My mind started feeling a little hazy, and more I felt like I simply didn't care about anything. A small and rapidly dwindling part of myself started to panic. I knew something bad was happening, but it was like my own inner voice was slowly getting quieter and quieter. I remember we reached the little summit, and I simply sank to the ground next to the pile of rocks. Without meaning to, I started tuning out the voices around me and fixed all my attention on the little pebbles in the dirt. I began tapping one against the other repeatedly. Do you know the kind of horror that is opposite of feeling scared or feeling anything at all? The kind of vacuous hideousness of a fly buzzing against a closed window for hours on end in an empty room. That's what was filling my mind. It was demonic in its meaninglessness. I touched my face and felt that I was grinning at nothing. Through all the emptiness, a thought floated to the forefront of my mind. You should just die. At first, it sounded totally reasonable, but something in me fought it, and I was momentarily troubled. Right then, my group started to walk down from the hill, and I followed. The further we walked, the more normal I felt, until we left the town that afternoon, and I was totally freaked out. When another girl, Anna, mentioned in an odd, offhand way that she had felt very strange and depressed while staying there, I told her that I'd felt the same. When the group leader mentioned that a local had told him that the town had been plagued with a rash of young women under 25 committing suicide, Anna and I went white. This next one is called What the Dog Knew. In my old apartment, my dog would, on occasion, look down the hallway towards the bedroom from the living room and growl for no apparent reason. Also on occasion, when I was sleeping in the bedroom, she slept at the foot of the bed, I would wake up with her staring intently at the door and growling. She was a big girl, 140 pounds of Great Dane and slobber. a colorful nebula you might see a picture of in a science magazine, three-dimensional and all. I immediately got the distinct impression that this thing had been watching me sleep for God knows how long and how many times before. For all the clarity of that distinct feeling, I had no sense of what it wanted, whether it was malevolent or just curious. I flipped right the F out. I jumped backwards to the other side of the bed, too terrified to scream, and that blur of light receded and disappeared over the course of about 3 seconds. My dog was going absolutely ape. So shortly thereafter, I asked the building manager if anyone had ever died there. She investigated and came back to me a couple weeks later saying yes, a woman had died of a drug overdose in that apartment in 1995, which at that time was 12 years earlier. She died shortly after having her child removed from her custody because of her addiction. My dog did still growl at the hallway from time to time, but I never saw it again. I moved out about a year later. I've had other encounters, but this thing was literally inches from my face, watching me sleep. I'm getting shivers now, just writing about it. The next story is called The Drive-By. We were camping once, driving through some city. My dad was driving, my mom on the passenger seat, and I was kneeling behind them, leaning on the boot that separated the truck from the camper. It was evening, not full dark. We weren't really talking, and my mom was looking out her window when she screams, "Oh God, oh my God, Jean, do you see it?" My dad says, "Yeah, I do. I'm going to slow down and let them by." He slowed down, and the car on the right passed us. I couldn't see inside, but their window was down, and the arm hanging out the window looked to be that of someone impossibly thin. I asked my mom what she saw, and she said it was nothing. My dad backed her up. Years later, I asked them about it again. My mom said it was a skeleton. It was no mask because you could see straight through the jaw. It had a tongue and eyes. It was death. My dad backed her up, but years later, after my mom had passed, he recanted, saying it was a mask because nothing could survive like that. The next story, the next and last story is called The Haunted Strip Club. Okay, so this was when I used to live in a different state. I got a job working as a cocktail server at a strip club, which was a good choice for me at the time, as the club was very fun, kind of metal punk vibe, and also very popular with lesbians. And since I was going through the process of coming out as bi, and was in a very radical F corporate society, F men, let's take their money kind of phase. I'm not one of those people who thinks stripping is super empowering, but it was a good fit at the time. Also, while I was there, after about 6 weeks, I would have terrible, suffocating feelings, almost like panic attacks, and terrible migraines while working in the club. I would often feel panicked and scarred, but I chalked it up to a stressful job in a strange environment. I never had these feelings anywhere else around this time. So the club was really kind of messy, not dirty, but just filled with things. Lots of tables in the bar, lots of speakers, an extra crap in the back storage room behind the stage, and a tiny crowded dressing room for the dancers. Behind the stage, there was a kind of storage room area that had several dressers and mirrors put in, as well as an old comfy couch in case the dancers wanted to use it as an extra dressing room or place to nap, but nobody really used it. This room gave me the worst, suffocating, panic-inducing vibes of all, but I had no explanation for it. So I would often be at work until 4 a.m. or later, and since I didn't have a car, public transportation wasn't running, and it was in kind of a sketchy neighborhood, I would wait until one of the dancers was done for the night, and she would drop me off at home. This was often after my own shift ended. When I first started working, I would spend that extra time trying to do side work, clean and straighten up like a good employee. But after a while, I would just hang out in the back room studying because I was also in grad school. That is, until I started completely the back room, and then I would leave and go to sit up at the bar or in the dancer's dressing room, and the feeling would mostly go away. So this is when stuff started to get worse. I have to add that some of it was around Halloween, so I was watching a lot of scary movies, and I was also smoking a ton of weed, so both these things might have had some effect on my psyche, but also these feelings never happened anywhere else around this time. I started to kind of bring it up to the dancer that drove me home, and she said the back room also creeped her out, but didn't go into any detail. So one night, after closing, I was carrying a box of extra glasses into the back room, and I heard the most terrifying sound of my life. It was like from a horror film, like a long screech, almost like electronic music, but just one tone, almost like a chainsaw that reverberated around the entire floor and walls. I dropped the box, screamed, and ran out to the floor. The bartender said he had heard the noise as well, but not as loud as me, and without the vibrating floor and walls. We started checking the sound system, see if the music equipment had just been messed up. This happened at least 5 more times while I worked there. Sometimes other people heard it, sometimes just me, but it was always when I walked into the back room. Twice when I walked into the back room, the light would flicker off and would be replaced with a red glow, like someone had put in a red light bulb. Both times that happened, I ran out, called the bartender, and they would check, and the light would be totally dead, not working. After a while, I was constantly shaken. I didn't want to tell the bartender every time something happened because I was afraid they would think I was crazy. After the noise and red light, I would never go to the back room, even when I should have been cleaning it. One time I was standing in the hall between the dancer's room and the back room, half-heartedly sweeping the floor and staring into the back room. I was starting to feel the panic rising in my chest, and I kept telling myself to look away and look into the dressing room, but I couldn't stop staring, like I was transfixed. And in the corner of my eye, I saw a reflection in the mirror set up leaning against the dresser in the back room. I forced my head to look, and I saw in the mirror 2 legs in black ripped tights floating about a foot above the floor, swaying back and forth. I threw the broom, screamed as loud as I could, and ran to the bar. I was convinced one of the dancers had hung herself in that room. I could see it so clearly in my mind. Of course, when we went back, nothing was there. One of the dancers was convinced that the room was haunted and I was seeing a ghost. She thought maybe someone had killed herself, but she thought it was nothing. Around all this happening, I felt like I was losing my mind. I was having panic attacks, migraines, I was sleeping with my lights on, I was terrified of my shadow and carried pepper spray everywhere I went. It may have just been a combination of everything in my life, like sleeping weird hours, grad school, dealing with my own stuff, but I've always been a high-stress person who's worked a lot more stressful jobs since then, and I have never experienced anything like that ever again in my life. About a week after I saw the legs in the mirror, I was working one more shift before taking a week off to do some research for a grad class and go on a long weekend trip with my girlfriend. This was near Halloween, so the club had kind of gone all out and had goofy decorations and costumes. I usually dressed in all black anyway, but I tried not to wear anything too sexy or distracting so that the customers would leave me alone and concentrate on the dancers. I just wore a black skirt and a t-shirt, but I had my face painted like a sugar skull. It was mostly white with jewels, and it was rad. Since I was so freaked out all the time at the club, I started asking if I could leave around midnight. I'd catch the last bus. But this night, my friends were meeting me to drink at a club after my shift. It was near the end of my shift, and I was taking off my apron in the dressing room and leaned over the dancer's mirror to check my makeup, and this is the last thing that I remember. Until I was being shaken awake by one of the bouncers with a friend and my girlfriend by my side. I was in the haunted back room laying on the couch, and my face paint was completely smeared all over my face. They said I had disappeared for 45 minutes until they went looking for me and found me asleep. They had been trying to shake me awake for almost 2 minutes. I was completely hysterical. I had no idea what had happened. My clothes weren't disturbed. My tip money there's almost no way anyone had been back there all night. I was almost afraid I had been drugged, but right after this event, I went to the doctor. I didn't have health insurance, so this was a big deal to me. And I got checked out and had them give me an MRI since I was afraid that I had a brain tumor or something like that to make me crazy. They suggested I speak to a psychologist. After that night, I had to quit the job and I never went back. Besides these horrible events, I loved working there and I made a lot of friends, but I absolutely lost my mind. And once I left, I never felt any of these feelings again, and I never saw